is what made you want to write this book?
I felt like I was just giving over the same ideas over and over, which is not a bad thing. I'm very happy to do it. And I just thought, like, I really got to get this out there. People don't have enough of this. Like it says in the subtitle, the skills you never learned. It would be great if this were out there. We spend this time in high school learning dumb things like trigonometry and the history of whatever, which you then promptly forget. But the things that you need to make a life work well, like, I don't know, how to do your taxes or how to communicate with people in difficult situations, those would be really helpful. So just getting this out there, in a way that's really digestible. It's not academic. It's not a research paper. It's a very easy to read book, and it gives people some concrete ways to do this better, which for nobody's fault, they haven't learned. And I really just want to get that out there and make the world a better place, man.
So what do you think is like the biggest challenge that couples face when it comes to communicating effectively?
I will tell you, I think it's that people feel this urgency to do it right away and to fix the problem right away. And the number one thing I say in the book, it's like the first chapter, is just wait a little while. Just wait. When you're angry is not the time to go deal with a situation. It is almost never an emergency. The fact that he left his socks on the floor again, or she forgot to pick up the dry cleaning, or whatever it is, these are definitely annoying things, especially if it's repeated and you want to talk about it. Sure, just not now, right? When you walk in and you find your socks, your partner's socks on the floor, and you're really irritated about it, you're not going to do it well. And we all know this is true. You walk in, guns blazing, and you want to make your point, and the other person gets defensive, and it escalates quickly, and nobody's happy. And yes, it is hard to wait a little while to come back and talk to it, but it makes it so much easier to pull off. So I think that's the first thing people need to do. Take a break, chill out, come back to it later. It will go better. I'm always like, I should say something about this. And then I'm like, no, wait. I'm like, no, it'll be all right. No. And I'm arguing with myself. I know the feeling. You want to deal with it right away. It's like, when you stub your toe and like you just have this urge to scream at the person next to you. Why did you leave that there? We don't know who left what way, but like somehow everybody's at fault when you stub your toe. It's the same thing. You find the empty milk container in the fridge and you want to go off and like fly off the handle at somebody, and it's a bad idea. It doesn't make things better.
So what do you think? Is there like a certain amount of time people should wait, or is it more like a personal kind of thing?
37 minutes and 26 seconds is the best. I think it's personal. You just have to get calmed down. For some people, it's a few minutes, try again. I think it also depends how far into the fight you got. If you just saw the milk jug and then you're able to like take 5 minutes and calm down, super. But for me, we'll take a break and usually we'll come back to it the next day. And that's fine. Again, none of these things are urgent. If we have an issue to talk about, we'll talk about it, just not right now. I think a lot of people have this problem that they worry we won't get back to it. We're just going to drop it. And that's what happens when you don't have a way to talk about a difficult issue. But when you get the hang of having conversations about the issues that matter, so then you become confident, okay, we could do this. And we can wait, and we will do it later, and that's much better. So time out is a great first strategy. It's not enough, obviously, to fix it. For some people, actually, it is. If you already know how to communicate well, and you're fine with that once you're calm, so great. Timeout is like your saving grace. But for the rest of us who need to learn the skills, okay, so you'll pick that up, and you'll practice, and you'll get better. And the better you get, the less urgent it feels to talk about it right now.
Yeah, that's important. You just need to sleep on it, and it's okay. Right? It's okay.
I talk about this in the book, and I tell everybody this advice. I have never seen anybody that it's worked well for. Because what happens is it's midnight and you're mad at each other and you think you're going to solve it. So you get into this big fat argument, and now what happens is it's 3 a.m. and you're still angry at each other, and now you're tired in the morning to boot. We're not like that. Human beings, we need some space to calm down. When you get physiologically ramped up, so you can't have a conversation well. It's going to be an argument. It's going to get nasty. Maybe you'll get all the way through it and get to the end, but it's so much wear and tear on the relationship. It can be hard to stop and go to bed and you're not resolved, yes. But like you said, you sleep on it, it's much better. First of all, you wake up calm. Second of all, half the things you were mad about in the morning, you're like, I was just annoyed, I was cranky, whatever. It just doesn't matter. But half the things do matter, and you want to talk about, the forgetting dry cleaning, whatever else it is. Okay, but now you're in a better place to talk about it. So yes, it's uncomfortable and sometimes awkward. It's better than this giant fight where everybody, walks away feeling even worse.
So what do you think, other than jumping the gun when it comes to arguments, what are other very common mistakes that you see in couples when it comes to communication?
So the next big thing is that both people are trying to make their point at the same time, right? We're in an argument, and I say, I hear what you're saying, but, and you say, no, that's not what I said. I said, and that's an argument. Whereas if I want to understand what's going on and try to hear your point of view and have you hear my point of view, that's called communication, then I have to shut up and listen to you first. And then you have to shut up and listen to me. And if we're going to be trying to make our point at the same time, it very quickly goes and escalates, it's a ping pong game. And again, we all know what that's like. We've all been in that situation. So, I tell people, it's, have a literal or figurative talking stick where we figure out who's talking right now. And when you're talking, I'm going to listen. And there's a whole process we talk about in the book that we can go into a little more about what that looks like and what I'm going to do when I'm listening and how I'm going to make that useful. Instead of just taking notes in my head about how to argue every point you've made, right? That's not very helpful. If you say this, I go, oh, okay, that was wrong. When it's my turn, I'll argue on that point. Like that's not listening. That's not communicating. It's not going to be helpful. When I am in the listening position, there are only 4 things that I'm going to do. 4 things. And it's like the best acronym ever. It's L.O.V.E. Get that? There you go. You're going to listen. You reflect in your own words. You validate. You empathize. We'll talk about this, right? Because what some people try to do is you're telling me how you're annoyed that I forgot to, I put the milk back in empty. And I'm sitting there trying to explain to you like, no, well, it wasn't empty. And I'm explaining to you what I did or what I meant. And that goes nowhere. And again, we all think this would make sense. Well, if I would just explain to her what I meant when I said that, she wouldn't be upset. We've all tried that, and we all know that doesn't work. We all think it should work, and yet it doesn't. You know it doesn't work because you've tried this before. You've tried to explain to your angry partner what was happening, and they didn't listen. So we don't do that. It would be great if that would work, but it doesn't. What works is you're mad at me for whatever I said. So I listen, which means I'm looking at you. I got my phone away. I'm listening. And then I reflect back what I'm hearing in my own words, meaning, okay, so you're mad at me because when I put the milk back, that tells you that I don't really care much about you. Oh, okay, I get that, right? Like, I'm just trying to reflect back what I hear so I know I'm getting it. Because there are lots of reasons you could be mad at me about the milk. Maybe because you didn't have coffee this morning, or maybe because I always do it and I never pay attention to your needs, or maybe because, I don't know, there's any number of things that this could mean to you. And if I assume I know what's in your head, that's not going to work. I don't live in your head. Maybe after we're married for 50 years, we'll have a better sense. But right now, I don't, and we're not actually married, as you would know. But I'm just, for the sake of the example. So, right. So I hear what you're saying and I reflect it back so I know that I got it. And not only do I have to know I got it, you have to know I got it. It's great if I say, yes, I understand. And maybe I do. But if you don't know for sure that I understand, you're not feeling better. So when I say you're mad at me because of this and this, and that, it makes you feel neglected, you go, yes. So now you go, he gets it. And then I validate that and I say, you know what, that makes sense. I can see why you would feel that way. If I can't, then I should ask, like, hey, I don't really understand why if I tie my shoelace, you get mad at me. Like, why does that make you angry? For some reason, apparently it does, and I have to understand that. Even if it makes no sense at first, unless you are like legit, psychotic or something, you have some reason for what you're thinking and feeling. And I should try to understand that and get to the point where I can say, yeah, that makes sense. I see why my leaving the milk there would make you feel neglected because you think I never really pay attention to you. I get that. And then I empathize and I say, oh, that sucks. I'm really sorry you feel that way. It sucks to feel neglected in your relationship. Man, no wonder you're upset. So now you know that I get it. You know that I care. And now we can go somewhere with it. Now we're communicating. We're connecting. We're not just arguing. We're not just batting the ball back and forth. You know that I get it. And from there, we can solve the problem.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that acronym. But for everybody listening, make sure you write that down.
Yeah, L.O.V.E. Listening, reflecting your own words, validating, empathizing. right? That's why it's so important. Let me make sure I understand what you are talking about. And that may not be what I think you are talking about or what I want you to be saying. I have to really just clear myself out. I'm not thinking about me. I have my own argument. Like, we could both be mad at each other for the same thing. And I got to put myself away and hear where you're at. And we'll switch, right? This works if I know that you're going to listen to me afterwards, right? Because otherwise, I'm trying to get my own opinion in there. And when you're talking, my opinion doesn't matter. When you're talking, what matters is this is how you see it. This is what's bothering you. I can understand that. It's not an argument about the fact about who's right and who's wrong. For right now, you're right. Right? We are not walking away from this agreeing on the facts. I'm just assuming that how you see it is real for you so that I can understand what you're feeling. Otherwise, it's an argument and it doesn't help.
Yeah. And without that listening, you're not going to get anywhere.
Nowhere.
So excuse me, so those are great tips for listening. Now, what about the person on the other side of that? When they're trying to explain things from their point of view, do you have any tips for that person?
Yes, right. So that obviously has its own way of doing it. Which again, none of this is meant to be like rigid rules. It's just a way of thinking about the process that comes at it from a collaborative point of view. Like we're working together here to get through this on both ends. If I'm just trying to tear into you or make my point, we're not getting very far in communicating together. So if I'm speaking to you, my goal here is not to convince you that I'm correct, certainly not to put you down or tell you, put you in your place. I want you to understand my experience, right? If you as a listener are trying to understand how I'm feeling, where I'm coming from, that is my job to get that across to you. And I do that by talking about me and not about you, right? So if I say, you are forgetful, you are so irresponsible, you don't care about me, what I'm doing is I'm inviting you to argue with me. Because if I say you don't care about me, you are going to jump in and say, of course I care about you. I did this and I do that. And how could you say that? And now we are not working on this together. But if I talk about myself, I'm saying, you know what? I'm feeling neglected. I'm feeling lonely in this relationship. You may not agree that you've done anything wrong. In fact, that is not required for this conversation at all. We do not have to agree on who did what when, who's right and who's wrong. All we need to do is for me to tell you what's going on for me and for you to care about that. So I say, you know what? I'm feeling pretty neglected. Because every time I see the empty milk jug, I just think to myself, nobody cares about me around here. And you can say, again, listen, reflect, validate, empathize. You say, like, wow, you really feel neglected because, the milk jug is empty and you wanted your milk, and I get that, and that sucks. So now we're connected around this. We've already agreed from the outset. That doesn't mean that you agree you're a bad person, or even that you agree that you left the milk in the fridge empty. Not about that. I'm just telling you how I'm feeling, and you are understanding and caring about that, and now we're working together. And then we can switch, and you can have a totally different story. You can say how frustrating it is for you to be held accountable for every little thing. Fine. And still, I can go back and say, yeah, that must really, really be frustrating for you to be held accountable like that. We don't have to reconcile the reality of who's right and who's wrong. You're hurt. I'm hurt. Let's help each other with that. As soon as I start talking about you, you are in defensive mode. You are going to argue with me on that. It's not worth it. If I talk about me and how I feel, you can't argue. You may think I shouldn't feel that way, but the reality is I do. I do feel that way. And you can either try to convince me not to, which you know is not going to work, or you can say, wow, that must suck. And if you care about me, it must. If I'm feeling lonely, even though you're doing everything you can to support me, okay, so it's not your fault. We're not sitting here saying whose fault it is. We're saying I feel this way. I may be out of my mind, but if I'm lonely and sad, you should care about that. And if you do, then we are working on this problem together. And if you don't, it's an argument.
Now, what would you say to the person that is in a relationship and they are trying to communicate and they're doing all these things, but the other person is just not as, they're not really taking it in and they are being very combative. And you're trying to stay calm and you're doing all the things, how would you guide that person to kind of handle that with the combative partner?
Yeah, right. I mean, that's obviously tough when one person wants to make things better and the other doesn't. So, we start with the basics, which is if your partner's being combative, take a break, come back later. Let them know in advance, hey, when things get heated, I'm going to walk out, take a break, come back, talk about it later. And then you employ the same strategies just from one end. When your partner's talking, you listen to them, you reflect, you empathize, you give them the treatment that you would like. And when you're talking, you talk about yourself. Hey, this is how I feel, so on and so forth. And they start to argue with you. It's like, wait, one second. I'd like you just to hear me. I don't need you to agree with me. I just want you to hear where I'm at. Right? So you try to stick to the process as best you can. And as that work begins to work better than the back and forth argument, we can settle into that pattern. And maybe they'd be interested in sort of learning the skills themselves about how to do it better. But for some people, bringing a third party is very helpful, right? So I work with couples all the time, and speaking to a third party professional who can help slow down that conversation, make it better, make it work more effectively is great. It's wonderful. There's nothing to be ashamed of because nobody's ever taught us this stuff. And so seeking out the help to do it right is a great idea. Obviously, if you're in a relationship with somebody who is nasty to you, doesn't want to do it differently, doesn't want to get counseling, okay, so you have a decision to make. Like, some people stay in relationships that are not particularly fulfilling for any number of reasons, and that's fine. I have no judgment. I mean, there's a lot of factors in it. But you cannot change other people. You do the best you can to do things well on your end, to seek out help. And if they don't want, they don't want. And that leaves you with a decision to make. One of the stuff that is in this book is applicable to an abusive relationship. And I say that in there. I have extensive experience working in the field of domestic violence. Somebody who is looking at a relationship as a place where I can be in control and call the shots, as looking at a relationship as a competition instead of a collaboration, none of this is going to work. They have a different mindset. This all applies to a relationship where two people are trying to make it better. Where one person is trying to win, this is not going to work, right? They're looking for power, they're looking for control, and yeah, it takes a recognition of that and understanding what's going on, and then it takes the strength to get out of that. But trying to communicate better with somebody who is trying to abuse you is not going to work, as it sounds like you well know. Yeah, and it's important to get that clear. I mean, there's tons of resources out there in terms of getting help for abusive relationships and figuring out whether it is. And, maybe you need to talk to your own therapist or counselor or coach or whatever to figure out, like, hey, is this relationship making sense, or am I getting taken advantage of? And again, it's certainly a good place where an objective outside observer can help you figure out, wait a second, you know what, this doesn't seem right. Like, if they say this to you all the time, or, like, they did that, that really is a red flag. And being able to recognize that, so you're not trying to just keep pouring your efforts into something where it just, there's a hole in the bucket. So I'm a big fan of the love languages also. I think it's a great concept, and it's helped a lot of people. I think it's important, like you said, to know what yours is and what your partner's is. So maybe we should just give a quick rundown of what this is, right? I don't know if everyone listening knows what we're talking about. There's this book called The 5 Love Languages, which introduces this concept that everybody feels loved in a different way. And there are 5 major ways, which seem to be fairly universal. Let's see if we can remember them. Let's see this. Physical touch, words of affirmation.
Yep. Quality time.
Quality time, acts of service, and gifts. Right? And so if I'm a physical touch person, and I am, and you give me a gift, I'm like, oh, that's nice, but it doesn't ring the bell. Whereas if you scratch my back, I'm like, now we're connecting. Right? Whereas somebody else might want words of affirmation, and here I am trying to give them a back rub, and they're not into it. They're like, okay, that's nice, but that doesn't really connect with me. But when you say, you know what, you are the best person, and I love being with you, and all these things, that really fills their bucket. So recognizing what that is certainly is helpful. I think that the need to communicate is probably independent of that. You need to be able to communicate to tell your partner what is your love language. You need to be able to communicate when you have an argument about whatever it is, which happens even in the most loving relationships, that we get annoyed with each other, we step on each other's toes, etc. So it's great to have the love languages as a tool to increase positivity. We do talk about positive communication in the book as well, not just what to do when something goes wrong. But I think it's sort of two separate streams. I think that whether your love language is words of affirmation or acts of service, the ability to communicate about that and to communicate when something goes wrong and to talk about the tough issues is going to be there anyways. And I don't think that people necessarily communicate differently. I mean, everyone communicates differently, obviously. But I don't know that that's necessarily tied to the love language. I think both are necessary.
you
Right.
receive love.
Yeah, and right, being able to talk about it instead of assuming. Assuming does not go very well. Right. If I think I know what's in your head, probably don't. Yeah, Mr. Rogers said it best. Nobody knows what you're thinking or feeling unless you tell them. I would start by talking about that level of it, meaning, hey, honey, I have this thing on my mind that I've really been wanting to talk about. I'm feeling kind of nervous just about opening it up. And have a conversation about that where, I call this kind of conversation empathic dialogue. Let's have an empathic dialogue about that. Hey, would you sit down and listen to me for a bit? I have some stuff on my mind. Oh, sure. Okay, well, here's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling kind of nervous and worried. I have this big thing on my mind that I've really been wanting to talk about, but I'm worried that you're going to get upset or that we're going to get into a fight or whatever it is. So again, now you can hear me out. You can listen, reflect, validate, empathize, and hear me out on that level. And now we're connecting on that, and we're feeling more comfortable and okay. And then you can tell me how you feel. You want to, you're confident we can make it through, or whatever it's going to be. And we're talking about that. And now we're more relaxed. We're more together. We're connected. Maybe we don't go ahead and have the next conversation right now, whether because that was already a lot, or we just don't have the time, or whatever's going on. But we come back to it later, and now we're in a better place to start that. Like, okay, let's pick this up tomorrow night. We'll sit down over dinner and we'll open this up. Okay, great. So now, even though this thing is maybe hanging over your head, you feel like we're working on this as a team. It doesn't feel so scary anymore. It's still a big thing to do, but hey, we've got each other's back. So then we sit down tomorrow and we say, okay, here's what's going on for me. And again, we use the same skills, and I talk about myself, and just being able to open it up at the beginning of saying, here's where I'm at, trying to talk to you, can help us connect around the issue before we even get into it. Well, they hold on to it for until they can't anymore, and then they just sort of cork off and throw it out there in an uncomfortable way. It's hard. Like, there are hard conversations. I think for every couple, building intimacy where you can really talk about anything takes years and years and years of working together. So there will be things that are hard to talk about and scary and unnerving and good. So we work on that together.
And that actually brings up another question for me. Do you have different tips for somebody who's maybe in the first 6 months of a relationship versus somebody that's been married for 20 years when it comes to communicating? I
would say the skills are the same. You may want to look. Somebody who's married 20 years hopefully feels more comfortable and confident. Assuming that they've been doing things decently. But if it's been fights all along, then probably not. But at 6 months being together, it might be hard to open up the deepest things or the most sensitive and personal stuff. And that's hard even later. I've spoken with many couples who have been married for decades who have never talked about, for example, their sex life because that's very uncomfortable. And yet, sure, it can be difficult. And I think the skills are the same. You may want to take it slower, right? You may want to talk about how nervous you are to talk about this topic, whatever it might be. But I think the skills are the same, where it's here, you listen to me, this is where I'm at, this is how I'm feeling. You listen, reflect in your own words, validate, empathize. That gets us through, right? So the topics may get deeper. We may feel more comfortable over time, but I don't think that the skills need to change. In the same way that whether you're a beginner tennis player or an advanced tennis player, maybe you're learning certain nuances, maybe you're practicing something harder, but it's not like we teach the beginner something different. Like, hold the racket this way, and then we'll change it later. Like, no, there's a way that will help you and a way that will not.
Right. So what kinds of things, what kind of tips do you have for people to really open up in that way?
I think part of it is being with a partner who is supportive and helpful and empathetic and things that helps a lot, right? If you're used to getting to arguments and not being supported and getting pushback on whatever you say, of course you don't want to open up, and that makes sense. But there's also the other part, which is, for people who have been through difficult things or trauma or bad relationships or whatever, it kind of makes sense to be protective of yourself. And so maybe that's some personal work that needs to happen, or therapy or whatever it is, to work through that. I mean, to some extent, you want to be self-protective. You don't walk out on the street and like, hey, guess what happened to me when I was a child, right? But on the other hand, if you're married for 20 years and you still can't talk about, intimate things together, okay, so what's the holdup there? Is it that your partner has not really been there for you in the past? Or have they been there for you, but you just have trouble because you are scared, because you have childhood experiences? And again, all that makes sense. And we can dialogue about this. You can tell me how hard it is for you to open up because you're scared I'll laugh at you. You're scared you'll be rejected. All these things. And before we even get into it, we can talk about the talking about it and connect around that, which helps us get into the core of the issue whenever we're ready for that.
I love this whole idea of kind of talking about it before you're talking about it, as far as this and with like the tough conversations.
Yeah.
I think that that's super important for people, and I hope everybody listening really takes that away and applies that to their relationships.
Sure, right. I mean, imagine saying, "Look, hey, you know what? I'd really like to talk about our sex life. It's very uncomfortable. Like, I don't know how to do it. I've never talked about this before. I'm afraid of, being rejected. Like, it's so uncomfortable." That is, one step removed. We can talk about that, and you can validate and hear how, like, yeah, that is tough. I kind of feel the same way. Again, when it's your turn, you'd share that part. Like, I feel the same way as you do. Like, yeah, I would love to talk about this with you, but I'm so nervous. It's like it feels so hard. And then we don't have to get into anything more personal than that. But again, now we are having a conversation about an intimate part of our lives, and we are connecting, and there's no pushback and there's no argument. That opens the door to be able to get into that.
Yeah. I feel like vulnerability too kind of takes practice.
Sure.
Even if you haven't really been through something that really makes it hard for you to open up, it can still be kind of awkward to talk about stuff like that.
Anybody who's been through middle school has good reason to be self-protective.
Yeah.
Right? Like, nobody walked around when we were like teenagers and adolescents and, just telling everything about ourselves. It was so guarded. There's so much judgment. Yeah, it makes sense to be guarded and to be worried about judgment. You have to be really self-aware and work on those parts of yourself to be able to do that. And you need a partner where you feel safe. Again, for the people who unfortunately do not feel emotionally safe in their relationships, it makes sense not to reveal those parts of yourself. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. What kind of tips do you have for people that are super busy and don't have that time to really come together and connect in their relationship? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, man, it's a busy world out there. Aren't we all? And then you throw a job into the mix and kids and all kinds of things. It's tough out there. I'm working on building a time machine to put more hours into the day. So stay tuned for that. But short of that, we've all got 24 hours, and there has to be some prioritizing. You work a lot. Good, makes sense. We all have to work, make money, support the family. We all have to, have friends, have some personal time, whatever it is. But we also need to work on our relationships and our marriages. And if we don't, they will not get much better. In the same way that we all need to have time to exercise, which of course none of us do as much as we want. But if you don't do that, then you get, flabby and stiff and all. Okay, so we do the best we can to juggle. If you put this totally aside and say, this is just not a big enough priority, then things probably won't get better than they are. And issues won't get resolved, and there'll be arguments. So it could be setting aside time once a week. Hey, half an hour, Saturday nights, that'll be our time to sit and talk. Or it could just be sometimes foregoing something else. Like, okay, you're supposed to go out to dinner with the whole family. Maybe you get a babysitter and you go out, just the two of you, to talk. If everything is so rigidly patterned that there isn't room for, a little flexibility to change and make differences where it's needed, it's going to be tough. But I do not have an answer yet for all of us who are so overloaded in our schedules and so much going on. Like, we just got to do the best we can. I totally get it. I'm the same way. I'm overloaded. I got 4 kids. It's a lot of kids to have 4.
That is a lot.
It's a lot of it's a lot. It's more than 3. It's a lot more than 3 apparently. So it just, I get it. I have empathy for all of you out there who are like struggling with the schedule. Prioritizing. Are we spending too much time on our smartphones, on social media? It feels very compelling. Maybe we could cut back a few minutes a day. Where are the places that we can cut some minutes out to spend with each other, which will, is not a quick fix, but it brings more satisfaction in the long term. In an instant gratification era like ours, it's hard to focus on that, but playing the long game can make a difference.
Yeah, basically saying that your relationship with your partner should be the priority over your kids. So do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. What your kids need more than anything is for you to have a good marriage.
Yeah.
Right? That's the best you can give your kids. Yes, your kids need time. And we're not saying that you totally neglect your children, but the priority should definitely be the marriage, because your kids will get the most out of that. Your kids do not need the latest toy. They do need time with their parents, but they need to see that their parents love each other and care about each other. They need a model for a good relationship so they grow up and know what that looks like and what to expect. And I think that's critically important. Again, we are all so overloaded in our schedules, it can be hard to figure out how to prioritize. But often people, they go only on vacations with their kids, they only go to dinner with the whole family, and making sure there's personal time, just the two parents, the two spouses, whatever it is, that's good for everybody. I know a lot of moms feel mom guilt when they leave their baby with a babysitter or something. Even an infant, even if they cannot, they don't know where you're going, the environment you create when you and your spouse have a good relationship is great for babies. It's great for children. It's great for teenagers. Having a stable, comfortable, loving environment at home, critically important.
Yeah, yeah. So my experience, I grew up. Everybody looks at my childhood like, oh, you had the greatest childhood. You got whatever you wanted. I've very blessed that I've been to Disney like 20 times. We go to Disney like every year when I was growing up. None of that was an issue. But now as an adult, looking back on it, I'm like, man, my mom just completely, like, her life was so wrapped up in me and my brother that I'm able to see now how much the relationship between my parents really suffered because of that, which is exactly what you're talking about here. And now that me and my brother are older and both moved out, they've been married for 40. Wow, it'll be 44 years. They've been married.
Cool.
And now they're finally, like, I've never seen them happier. Now that they're focusing on each other.
I can totally imagine when the kids being out of the house that I'll be a little bit happier. I guess.
Oh yeah.
Love my children. It's a lot.
It is. So how old are your kids?
Oh boy, 1 second. 16, 13, 10, and 7.
Oh wow. Okay. So
right.
Wide range.
Yeah, 2 of them are teenagers. 2. I have 2 teenage girls. They're all girls, by the way. 2 teenage girls in my house.
See, I have 1 teenage girl, and that's enough.
It's more than enough.
Yeah, right? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, speaking of your family and everything, are there any specific things that you and your wife do as far as communication?
We do everything that I say in the book. I live this, right? It's not like, oh, here's a good idea, and now I'll go do my own thing. I live this. And in fact, in the book, I have several examples of my epic failures and how we recovered, right? So I talk about how I use this, and I recognize that it's hard, and we are the same. My wife hasn't even read the book. She says, I don't have time to read the book, but I know the book because we live the book.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah, and fortunately, our love languages are quite compatible. I'm physical touch, and she's quality time. So we will sit on the couch for like hours at a time, and she'll give me a rub here and there, rub my feet, rub my back, whatever it is, and we'll talk about stuff. And she's thrilled just being together, and I am thrilled getting rubbed. And it's just like it's a fantastic. We are very fortunate that it matches up very well that way. Friday nights after the week is done, we often just sit on the couch. We have our little couch time, and we'll just talk about all these things, And when it comes to, sensitive topics, we'll make sure that we're in the right mode where, we know who's talking and we're going to, speak from our own place. But often we're just, shooting the breeze about whatever's been going on and, the crazy political world and, how our friends are doing and things like that. And, spending that time together. Friday night's a great time, man. Just chill out and relax and connect in that way. Our kids are now fortunately old enough. They'll read, they'll play on their own. It was harder when they were younger, but okay. So you rock the kid with one hand and rub your husband with the other. That works too. Again, 2 quality time people, great. You can walk and talk for hours. And if it doesn't match up so well, great. You do the best you can. You push yourself. That's a growth edge. I mean, everybody has places that they need to grow in themselves and in their marriage. So maybe for you, it means that you're not a big talker, but okay, if your partner is, so you spend extra time and you push yourself to walk around and talk or go to dinner, whatever else it is. Whatever is needed. Like every couple has to grow towards each other. There are very few couples where everything is perfect and everything is matched up. I mean, my wife and I match up in some great ways, and we're very different in others, and that's a growth edge, and that's fine. That marriage is very much about that, about growing towards each other.
Okay, what are some signs that you maybe have encountered in either your professional or personal life that kind of indicate that maybe somebody or a couple would benefit from going to counseling?
Well, professionally, I see people in counseling already, and I can tell pretty quickly that they need to be there because they'll break out into arguments in front of me, and I'll have to shut them up. So that's good. I've also seen some friends who do that, where they try to talk about something and it instantly becomes an argument. And so I've certainly recommended my friends. Yeah, I think that if your relationship is just not where you want it to be, so great, reading a book, talking to someone is helpful. But if it's not working, then yeah, go get a professional and get some couples counseling and make it better. There are lots of ways to do it. There are lots of good people out there. There are lots of bad people out there. So, sometimes people go to a therapist and it's a lousy experience and they say, okay, well, it's not for me. I don't know. Try someone else. There's lots of different people out there. It's unfortunate there are a lot of bad therapists out there, but there's a lot of good therapists out there. I'm one of the good ones. So, you got to find the person that works for you.